For a while now, I've been locked in a battle with the Internal Revenue Service over whether or not I owe taxes for unpaid amounts from 2019. Currently, they're indicating that with penalties and late fees, I owe them $13,000, and that they'll be taking me to court later this year if something isn't arranged. And why do they think I owe $13,000? This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, a podcast about technology, history, and getting myself out of debt. Thanks to Jeff Atwood, Daniel Boyd, and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. Yes, this is all about the fact that I take income from the Patreon for this actual podcast that covers debt and paying off debt using the podcast. Here's how that all happened. Patreon used to have a rather limited set of payment options, ways to take money that had been earned through the Patreon and delivering it to their users. And for a long time, the easiest way to do it was using PayPal. A number of years ago, Patreon started sending tax information directly to the IRS, and the IRS seems to be a little bit confused. While my income has been reported via PayPal from Patreon, the IRS refuses to believe that the money from Patreon is actually being accounted for in the PayPal report. So, they've claimed that taxes are owed on that specific money. And because this money hasn't been paid for over years, it has gained interests and fees, sending it up into the thousands of dollars. Why am I bringing this up? Well, first of all, why this podcast was created in the first place was to help pay down debts that I had gotten and help with any recurring debts that I would encounter. And let me say how much of a success it has been through all the people who've supported me over the years. I've had medical bills draw down to zero almost instantly, taking away all sorts of stress that I used to have about whether or not I should get tested for something or if I should stay overnight, because I was concerned that those costs would add up and I wouldn't be able to pay them. There are all sorts of conditions and issues and medical situations that I've had over the years that have been detected, treated, and in some cases, basically cured. This podcast has had that effect on me. But also, in regards to taxes, it has given me a massive amount of education in how taxes work, how to treat them, and how to emotionally handle dealing with institutions like the IRS. So, this episode is mostly about me sharing transparently what I am going through and what I am trying to do with it, because if nothing else, I want people who are listening to this to be aware that others go through it too. They should never feel that they're alone, and that there are ways to compartmentalize the parts of you involving finances and taxes and other problems so that you can still enjoy your life day to day. IRS letters are very unique in how they come to you. They don't indicate on the outside of the envelope what exactly they are, and when you open them, they could easily be a refund, a reminder, a warning, or a threat. They look the same, they say the same things, and they indicate in no uncertain terms the sort of penalties and remediations they may enact if they believe that money is owed to them. Sometimes you get good news, a refund, or a notification that you've paid off a debt. But other times, you get good news that turns into bad news. For example, I received a refund for my 2020 taxes, but I was told that they were holding the money because of other concerns they had that I owed money for other years. In other words, they notified me that I had money and also that I wasn't going to get it. To assist me in everything I do, I have an accountant. somebody who I contact on a frequent basis, ask questions, ask for insights, and work with them to create more documentation or call the IRS directly to have discussions with a frontline agent about what solutions there are or what misunderstandings can be handled. Having an expert costs money, but it's money well spent if it's an area, like mine, where there's complications and considerations that need to be dealt with. It is absolutely no shame and totally expected that you would ask for help, for assistance, or to utilize experts instead of going it alone. Something I've said on many occasions when I'm giving advice to somebody who is starting some sort of a concern, whether it's a podcast of their own or a website or project, is that a lot of times when you see somebody online, in media, in other situations, that person is probably 4 to 10 people, with folks who you don't know about working on the back end, either as friends, associates, or even employees and collaborators, to create what you see as being a single person. So many of my other projects, or projects that I'm involved in that I discuss on this podcast, are being done in collaboration with longtime friends, with family, or with associates who can often take on the bulk of the work, and somebody is only vaguely aware of their contribution if they're not part of the team. That's the nature of many collaborations and many efforts. I think it's a devastatingly dangerous illusion to convince yourself that a single person is doing all sorts of things that you yourself are trying to do alone without being aware that you are comparing yourself to a team. In fact, if you want, you can consider my doctors and my accountant as part of the team of this podcast. One of them keeping me physically healthy and another taking care of me fiscally, making sure that my payments are taxed correctly and that if any issues come up, their expertise contributes to what I'm doing. Nobody, but nobody, should ever think it's a good idea to work alone. So, what are my options here? Well, first of all, I have calls to make to the IRS, a whole bunch of letters to write, and further consultation with my accountant, because it is very likely that this same problem I'm having for 2019 will arrive in 2020 and 2021. At the beginning of this year, I switched to direct deposit for Patreon, bypassing PayPal and hopefully preventing this sort of mistake in the future. Whether I'm looking at years of problems or additional issues as time goes on, I couldn't tell you. But I'll say this. Every day should be grabbed with both hands as you handle the stresses of life that come externally, that weigh down and imply dark times ahead. It helps nobody, especially yourself, to sink into a private, quiet darkness. It does you no favors. It takes away life that you could have, books you could be reading, walks you could be taking. I've gone on so many walks to consider the ramifications of what I'm working with, but also sometimes just to enjoy the walk, just to have a piece of life myself, far away from the day-to-day considerations of what's coming down. I've been through court cases, I've endured all sorts of conflicts, and all I can say is that for whatever stress they provided, the only antidote that I could find was living my best life as best I could, separated and removed from whatever the bad things were. I'm reminded of a situation at the Internet Archive where a short circuit burned down one of the buildings, a scanning center, destroying all the equipment within it, burning it to the floor, although thankfully leaving the main building unscathed. And I was told it was 4 a.m. that multiple fire departments came and put out the fire. And Brewster Kahle, founder of the Internet Archive, had arrived and was looking at a destroyed building. And while he was being interviewed by the press, A few of them were surprised at how upbeat he was, how excited he was, talking about how maybe they could build something even more impressive than what was already there. And it sounds very odd, but it's because he has never let the stresses, the negativity, drag him down into inaction. A court case can take years to clear up, a fight with the IRS, months or years itself. And throughout that time, to hit pause is the greatest sin of all. I assure you that as long as people wish for me to tell stories or give my opinions or describe lessons I've learned, I'll keep doing this podcast. It is an honor to be given your time, and it is a delight to open up whatever envelopes the IRS sends me and figure out, with expert help and a community of friends and collaborators, what my next step shall be. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It. Thanks to James Bekoyanu, Mark Pilgrim, Emilio Oliveira, Ernie Hershey, Michael Rubin, Matt Reynolds, Manxalot, Sean Kelly, Dilip Reddy, Trixie the Cat, John Sturm, Josiah Lusher, and Anonymous, along with the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. Honestly, I'm going to persevere. And you, I assure you, will too.